They were waiting for you to break, to cry, to beg, to crawl back, and you didn't. That silence, that stillness, that refusal to chase, that's the moment the power shifted, and they felt it. If you've ever stayed silent when someone expected you to crumble, type, "I didn't beg" in the comments. Reclaim that moment. The narcissist expects emotional collapse when control is threatened because control is the architecture of their psychological stability. When they sense distance, independence, or detachment from you, it does not register as a normal relational shift. It registers as danger. Their internal world is built on the assumption that they must dominate the emotional narrative to feel secure. So when you pull back, set a boundary, or simply stop over-functioning in the relationship, they anticipate a very specific outcome: your panic. They believe you will unravel because, historically, that reaction reinforced their power. If in the past you flooded their phone with messages, over-explained yourself, apologized excessively, or tried to repair things you didn't break, that response became evidence to them that they mattered more. Your distress confirmed their significance. It reassured them that they were central, irreplaceable, and in control. For someone with strong narcissistic traits, relationships are often less about mutual connection and more about regulation of their fragile self-esteem. They provoke insecurity through withdrawal, silent treatment, or sudden coldness, because it activates your attachment anxiety. When you react emotionally, it stabilizes them. Your collapse becomes their proof of worth. So when control is threatened, they brace for your breakdown. They may even manufacture scenarios designed to trigger it: a delayed reply, a dismissive comment, a public display of indifference. Each move is calculated to create emotional disequilibrium in you. They expect tears, fear, pursuit. They expect you to fight for proximity. What they do not expect is steadiness. They do not expect you to regulate yourself, because if you can self-soothe, if you can tolerate the discomfort without chasing them, then the control lever stops working. And without control, they are forced to confront something they avoid at all costs: their own insecurity. Begging equals validation and ego fuel because, in a narcissistic dynamic, emotional intensity is interpreted as proof of value. When you beg, plead, over-explain, or desperately try to fix the relationship, you are sending a very specific psychological message. You matter more than my dignity. You have the power to destabilize me. And for someone organized around fragile self-worth, that message is intoxicating. Narcissistic personalities often rely on external validation to regulate their internal instability. They do not have a steady, self-generated sense of worth. Instead, they extract it from reactions: praise, admiration, fear, jealousy, and especially desperation all function as supply. But desperation is particularly potent because it confirms dominance. It reassures them that they are not just liked, but needed, not just wanted, but indispensable. When you beg, you are not simply asking them to stay. You are reinforcing a hierarchy. You are placing them above you in the emotional structure of the relationship. That hierarchy feeds their grandiosity. It tells them they are the prize. It confirms that their withdrawal created impact. It proves that their silence has power. This is why, during a discard or silent treatment, they often wait. They anticipate the flood of messages. They expect you to break first. The begging becomes a ritual that restores their sense of superiority. Once you plead, they feel back in control. Their ego, which may have felt bruised by your independence or boundary, gets repaired through your pursuit. What makes this dynamic so painful is that the begging rarely leads to genuine repair. It may bring temporary reconnection, but it strengthens the imbalance. Each time you chase, the pattern becomes more entrenched. They learn that distance increases your effort. They learn that withholding increases your devotion. And over time, your emotional reactions become the currency that funds their self-esteem. Your silence disrupts their power script because narcissistic dynamics tend to follow a predictable emotional choreography. There is an unspoken sequence. They withdraw, you pursue. They criticize, you defend. They threaten distance, you prove loyalty. This pattern becomes the script that maintains their sense of control. It is familiar, rehearsed, and reliable. They know their lines. They expect yours. When you go silent, not in retaliation, not as manipulation, but as regulation, you step out of the assigned role, and that is destabilizing because their strategy depends on your participation. Power in these dynamics is relational. It requires a reaction. Without your anxiety, their withdrawal loses impact. Without your pursuit, their distancing loses meaning. Silence interrupts the reinforcement loop. If in the past their coldness triggered your panic, that panic rewarded the behavior. It taught them that pulling away produces attention. But when you respond with steadiness instead of urgency, the feedback they expect never arrives. The lever they pulled no longer moves anything. This creates cognitive dissonance for them. They may think, why aren't they reacting? Why aren't they chasing? The absence of your response forces them into uncertainty, and uncertainty is deeply uncomfortable for someone who relies on predictability to feel superior. Your silence removes the reassurance that they are still central in your emotional world. Importantly, this silence is not about punishment. It is about reclaiming agency. It signals that you are no longer willing to engage in cycles that destabilize you. And because narcissistic control often thrives on emotional chaos, your calm becomes disruptive. The power script only works if both people read from it. When you stop delivering your expected lines, the entire dynamic falters. They may escalate, provoke, or attempt to draw you back into the script, because the unfamiliar absence of your reaction feels like loss of control. And loss of control is the one thing their structure cannot easily tolerate. Indifference wounds deeper than anger because anger still signals investment. If you are angry, you care. If you are arguing, defending, reacting, you are still emotionally engaged. And for someone with narcissistic traits, engagement of any kind can be metabolized into validation. Even your rage confirms that they occupy space in your mind. It proves they still have impact. Indifference, however, is different. Indifference communicates emotional detachment. It signals that their behavior no longer defines your mood, your worth, or your sense of stability. And that is profoundly threatening to someone who relies on emotional reactions to feel significant. Narcissistic personalities often interpret strong emotion as evidence of their power. If they can make you cry, they feel influential. If they can provoke you into defending yourself, they feel dominant. Anger keeps the connection alive. It maintains the energetic cord between you. In conflict, they still matter. But indifference severs that cord. When you become emotionally neutral, not cold, not cruel, simply unmoved, the feedback loop collapses. There is no visible reaction to feed on, no escalation to exploit, no drama to harvest. Your calm detachment reflects something they struggle to tolerate: irrelevance. And irrelevance strikes at the core vulnerability beneath grandiosity. Because beneath the inflated self-image is often a fragile fear of being insignificant. When you stop reacting, they can no longer confirm their importance through you. Your indifference becomes a mirror they cannot control. This is why indifference often provokes more intense attempts to regain attention. They may criticize, charm, triangulate, or provoke, not because they suddenly care more, but because they feel the loss of emotional leverage. Anger keeps you in the arena, indifference walks out of it. And walking out removes the audience they depended on. They may escalate tactics when you don't chase because the original strategy was designed with one assumption, that you would respond. When the silent treatment, withdrawal, or sudden coldness fails to produce your panic, they experience not just disappointment but destabilization. The mechanism that once restored their sense of control is no longer working. And when a control-based strategy fails, escalation often follows. Escalation can take many forms. They may suddenly become overly charming, reappearing with affection, nostalgia, or promises. This is not necessarily reconciliation, it is an attempt to re-engage the emotional hook. If charm doesn't work, they might pivot to provocation, subtle insults, public indifference, or strategic displays meant to trigger jealousy. The goal is the same: generate a reaction. Why? Because reaction equals relevance. When you don't chase, it disrupts their expectation of dominance. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty feels like loss of control. To regain equilibrium, they intensify behavior. They may test new angles. They may increase unpredictability. Some will attempt triangulation, introducing another person into the dynamic to stimulate competition. Others may play the victim, framing themselves as misunderstood or abandoned to lure you back into caretaking. Escalation is not evidence of deeper love. It is evidence of threatened ego. It reflects an attempt to reestablish the emotional hierarchy that once favored them. If you were previously the one apologizing, over-functioning, or repairing, your refusal to do so leaves a vacuum. They feel compelled to fill it with stronger tactics. What's crucial to understand is that escalation often happens precisely because your silence is working. It signals that you are no longer easily manipulated, and that threatens the stability of a dynamic built on predictable responses. The intensity may increase before it decreases, because when control slips, the instinct is not surrender. The instinct is amplification. Your refusal to beg is a boundary, not a game. It is not a strategy to make them jealous. It is not a performance designed to manipulate the outcome. It is a decision rooted in self-respect, and that distinction matters deeply. In narcissistic dynamics, boundaries are often misinterpreted as challenges. When you stop pleading, stop over-explaining, stop trying to convince them of your worth, they may frame it as you playing hard to get or trying to win. But a true boundary is not about winning. It is about protecting your psychological stability. Begging keeps you in a reactive position. It communicates that their approval determines your emotional safety. When you refuse to beg, you are quietly stating that your dignity is not negotiable. You are choosing self-regulation over emotional chaos. That choice is internal. It does not depend on whether they return, apologize, or change. A boundary says, I will not participate in dynamics that diminish me. It does not say, I hope this makes you chase me. The difference lies in intention. Games are outcome-focused. Boundaries are value-focused. Games attempt to control another person's behavior. Boundaries control your own behavior. For someone accustomed to power imbalances, your boundary may feel like defiance. They may push against it. They may test it. They may accuse you of being cold or selfish. That reaction does not invalidate the boundary. It reveals how unfamiliar they are with limits that are not centered around them. When you refuse to beg, you are not withdrawing love. You are withdrawing self-abandonment. You are deciding that access to you requires reciprocity, not desperation. And that shift from proving your worth to protecting it is not manipulation. It is maturation. Emotional detachment restores your psychological balance because it interrupts the constant state of hyperactivation that narcissistic dynamics often create. When you are entangled in the cycle of withdrawal and pursuit, your nervous system lives in anticipation. You are scanning for mood shifts, decoding tone changes, bracing for silence. Your body is on alert even when nothing is happening. That chronic vigilance is exhausting. Detachment is not numbness. It is regulation. It is the deliberate decision to stop internalizing every fluctuation in their behavior as a referendum on your worth. When you detach, you begin separating their actions from your identity. Their coldness is no longer proof that you are unlovable. Their criticism is no longer evidence that you are inadequate. Their silence is no longer a crisis you must solve. Psychological balance returns when you reclaim responsibility for your own emotional state. Instead of reacting automatically, you respond intentionally. Instead of chasing reassurance, you generate it internally. That shift reduces anxiety because you are no longer outsourcing your stability to someone unpredictable. In many narcissistic relationships, emotional highs and lows create a biochemical loop. Intense connection followed by sudden distance. The unpredictability strengthens attachment even when it is painful. Detachment weakens that loop. It allows the nervous system to settle. You begin to experience longer stretches of calm, fewer spikes of panic. This balance also sharpens clarity. Without the fog of urgency, you see patterns more objectively. You recognize manipulation faster. You stop romanticizing crumbs of attention as grand gestures. Emotional space creates cognitive space. And in that space, you rediscover something essential, your capacity to feel steady without constant validation. That steadiness is not dramatic, it is quiet, but it is powerful. Because once your equilibrium no longer depends on their behavior, the dynamic loses its grip on you. Their shock reveals how transactional the relationship truly was because, beneath the surface, the connection was often structured around exchange rather than mutuality. In healthy relationships, care is not contingent on performance. Affection does not disappear to test loyalty. Presence is not withheld to measure devotion. But in narcissistic dynamics, connection frequently operates like a contract you never consciously signed. Attention in exchange for admiration, closeness in exchange for compliance, stability in exchange for emotional supply. When you refuse to beg, the expected transaction fails. They anticipated payment. They anticipated pursuit as proof of value. When it does not arrive, the confusion on their end exposes something uncomfortable. The relationship may have been less about shared intimacy and more about maintaining a hierarchy that benefited them. Their shock is not simply about losing you. It is about losing the predictable return on investment. If they gave you intermittent affection, they expected amplified gratitude. If they offered temporary reconciliation, they expected heightened loyalty. The dynamic often relied on imbalance, you giving more, proving more, tolerating more. When you stop participating, the illusion of unconditional connection fractures. They may react as though a rule has been broken, but the rule was never about love. It was about leverage. Your refusal to chase disrupts the economy of validation that sustained the structure. In that moment of shock, something becomes clear. If the bond were rooted in reciprocity, your silence would invite conversation, not ego injury. It would prompt reflection, not escalation. The intensity of their reaction often mirrors how dependent the dynamic was on control rather than care. And when you see that clearly, it reframes the entire experience. What felt like profound intimacy may have been conditional access. What felt like deep attachment may have been reinforced dependency. Their shock becomes revealing, not because it hurts them, but because it shows you what the relationship was truly built on.